I was pregnant for 7 months and became a surrogate. The sponsor and her husband switched embryos in the delivery room. Not only did I play the role of a good wife for 20 years, I even taught my enemy's son to run a business empire. When the paternity report was slammed in front of the press, my adopted son clamored to send me to a nursing home. And you pressed the remote control to activate the overseas trust. 20 years of hidden stakes have frozen their smiles. At this moment sirens wailed from outside the venue. 7 months into my pregnancy, I accidentally overheard a conversation between my husband and the poor student I had been sponsoring. Stephen, if your wife finds out that the baby in her womb is actually our fertilized egg, she might get so angry that she'd kill herself, don't you think? Rosie said and chuckled softly. It'd be better if she did. That way, all her assets would be mine, Stephen coldly answered. The only problem is if she decides to divorce me and kick me out. That's why we need to keep this secret. Once our child inherits her assets, we'll deliver her a crushing blow. That night, I pretended I didn't hear a thing. I gave birth to the child and raised him with utmost care. 24 years later, after my son returned from studying abroad, I transferred all my company shares and assets to his name. At a press conference, Rosie, the impoverished student before, holding my husband's arm and clutching a maternity test report, she walked straight up to me and declared, Kian is my biological son. You've been taking him from me all these years. It's time to return him to me now. My son also threw a divorce agreement in my face, his words cold and ruthless. Hurry up and divorce my dad so we can finally reunite as a family of 3. Considering you gave birth to and raised me, I'll give you a monthly allowance of $200. I smirked faintly and replied, all right, wife, weren't you supposed to attend a board meeting at the company today? Why are you still working in the study? Stephen walked in with a cup of hot milk, placing it gently in front of me, his voice as tender as ever. I closed my laptop and smiled up at him. Kian's teacher mentioned he's been coughing a bit lately. I've arranged for him to see the best pediatric specialist tomorrow. Touched, Stephen stroked my hair and said, you always get so concerned whenever Kian has even the slightest discomfort. When he grows up, he'll definitely repay your kindness with filial devotion. I looked at Stephen and replied matter-of-factly, of course. I'm Kian's mother. If I don't look after him, who will? Moved by my words, Stephen smiled warmly. You're amazing. Marrying you and raising a child with you has been the greatest blessing of my life. I met his gaze, his eyes filled with affection, and I offered him a faint smile without saying a word. Stephen and I had been together for 10 years, 3 years of dating and 7 years of marriage. During this decade, he had always cared for me when I was sick or tired, surprised me in unexpected ways, and held me tightly during moments of passion, whispering that he would love me forever. Had I not overheard that conversation that day, I would never have believed that the man who claimed to love me so deeply could betray me like this. Aunt Rosie, you're finally here. Kian's delighted voice suddenly echoed from the living room. I immediately got up and walked out of the study, only to see Rosie stepping through the door. She effortlessly scooped my son into her arms and planted a playful kiss on his cheek. Baby Kian, did you miss me? As she spoke, her gaze fell on me, her smile freezing, her expression momentarily unnatural. Before she could say anything, Stephen quickly stepped forward to explain. Wife, there was a parent-child outdoor activity at Kian's kindergarten today. I figured you'd be busy with work, so I didn't bother you. I asked Rosie to help out instead. Rosie put down Kian and immediately chimed in nervously. Yes, Daphne, you've supported me for so many years. I've always been grateful and wanted to repay your kindness. The moment I got Stephen's call, I rushed right over. Watching her flustered attempts to cover up her guilt, I couldn't help but recall the day my son was born. Rosie had also accompanied Stephen to the hospital under the pretext of visiting the baby, staying by his side as I endured labor. At that time, Rosie was incredibly excited, pacing back and forth in the hallway, wringing her hands nervously. When she saw that I had given birth to a son, she immediately rushed over, grabbing the baby and refusing to let go. Her eyes were brimming with joy, turning red with excitement. The nurse, unable to hold back a chuckle, teased her. Who are you to the child? You seem even more excited than the mother. Rosie looked embarrassed but quickly tried to explain when she noticed I was silent. Daphne, I couldn't help myself. Kian is just too adorable, and I accidentally gave him a kiss. You're not mad, are you? I smiled slightly and responded calmly. Of course not. I'm so busy with work that I sometimes neglect my family. I'm grateful that you're willing to help take care of Kian. Hearing this, both Rosie and Stephen breathed a sigh of relief. My son then ran up to me, his innocent eyes looking straight into mine as he asked, Mom, are you going to the office today, or will you go to kindergarten with Dad and me? I gently patted his head and asked, what does Kian want Mommy to do? Without hesitation, he replied, I want Mommy to go to work, and Aunt Rosie can take Daddy and me to kindergarten. As though afraid Kian would say something inappropriate, Stephen quickly pulled him into his arms and explained to me, Sweetheart, Kian just doesn't want to distract you from work. Last time, he even told me not to bother you because you're working so hard. Rosie nodded in agreement. Kian is such a considerate child. Only someone as outstanding as you, Daphne, could have such an obedient son. Smiling, I said to my son, all right, let's do as Kian says. Hearing this, Kian jumped up and down with joy. He completely ignored my presence, grabbing Rosie and Stephen's hands and dragging them outside. Watching their happy little family of 3, I allowed myself a faint smile, turned around, and went back to my study to continue my unfinished work. Perhaps they thought I was easy to fool, that I'd never notice anything strange, so Rosie grew bolder by the day. At first, she would sneak around with Stephen while I was at work, but now, even when I was home, she'd find all sorts of excuses to visit. Daphne, I've been teaching myself how to cook recently. I wanted to make something delicious to thank you for all your help over the years. Daphne, I just came back from the countryside and brought some local specialties for you. Daphne, I've quit my job to start a business, but I'm short on startup funds. Can you help me out? Although I knew deep down that Rosie's visits were all excuses to see my son and Stephen, I never refused her. Whenever she came, I always welcomed her politely. I even agreed to all her requests for help. Stephen seemed delighted with this arrangement. Whenever Rosie came over, his lips would curl into an uncontrollable smile. Sometimes, he'd even flirt with her openly in front of me, exchanging exchanging knowing glances and secret smiles. Even my son grew more and more attached to Rosie, going so far as to buy her a pair of house slippers so she could visit anytime she wanted. This life continued until my son's college entrance exams. On the day the results were released, Rosie arrived at our house early in the morning to wait with us. When we saw my son's shockingly low score, Stephen furrowed his brows in anger. "How could you score this poorly?" he snapped. My son, however, remained nonchalant. "So what? Our family has money. Mom can just buy me a spot at any school she wants," Kian declared carelessly. Stephen gave me a subtle glance. Seeing that I didn't react, he continued, "Your mom may love you, but she can't indulge you like this. Running the company alone isn't easy for her. You need to show some ambition. How else will you help her or make her feel confident enough to hand the company over to you one day?" Rosie chimed in earnestly. "Kian, your dad is right. Even though Daphne is your mom and will always take care of you, you need to develop your own capabilities. Otherwise, how will you earn the respect of the seasoned executives when you take over the company?" Watching the two of them echo each other, I smiled faintly and said calmly, "It's fine. I've already planned everything for Kian. I'll send him abroad for further studies. Once he's back, he'll naturally take over the company. After all, everything I have is for Kian." Hearing this, the three of them smiled contentedly. I smiled too, but for a different reason. They thought I was naive. I thought they were laughably foolish. During the process of arranging his study abroad, I took my son to the company every day, teaching him the ins and outs of the business without reservation. On the day of his departure, Stephen accompanied him to the airport, gripping his hand tightly, his face filled with reluctance. Rosie also made a special trip, bringing a pile of things for my son, worried about his life in a foreign country. The two of them gave him endless reminders, creating a warm and touching scene, a true depiction of parents' worry when their child travels far away. After my son boarded the plane, they watched it ascend into the sky, their eyes brimming with tears until it disappeared from view. Only then did they leave, reluctantly, with tears still glistening. Once my son left for his studies, Rosie visited our house less frequently, but Stephen began going out more often. Each time he returned, he seemed utterly drained. When I asked about it, he'd claim he was out with friends or had joined a gym to stay fit. On days he ran out of excuses, he'd feign sadness, sighing dramatically. I raised Kian with my own hands. "He's never been away from me for this long. I can't help but miss him. If I don't find something to occupy myself, I'll fall apart." Ignoring the lingering scent of Rosie's signature perfume on him, I smiled and reassured him, "Kian will be back soon. Then, we can all be together again." Stephen's lips curved into a faint smile, laden with hidden meaning. "Yes, soon, our family of three will be reunited." 4 years later, my son returned from studying abroad. Just like old times, Rosie showed up early at my house, accompanying Stephen and me to the airport. The moment they saw my son, Rosie and Stephen couldn't contain themselves, rushing forward to embrace him tightly as if no one else existed. After their emotional reunion, my son walked straight up to me and got straight to the point. I'm back. When will you hand over the company to me?" Seeing his eagerness, I smiled calmly and said, "Let's go. I've already arranged a press conference. I'll officially hand everything over to you in front of everyone." At the press conference, the room was packed to capacity. Journalists, prominent figures, and business elites had all gathered to witness the historic moment of the Stellar Sync Group's leadership transition. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, I announced, "My son, Kian, will take over as the new president of the Stellar Sync Group."